So, Doc, we've talked about the breathing triangle and it being really the most valuable real estate in the world.
Yeah.
And that's really opened up what you now call the airway breathing category, and what we're trying to, what we're not trying, we're the top of the airway breathing category.
It's a big category. So I guess I'd say we serve that category. It's a category that didn't exist. So we've helped to define that category. What are we saying when we say airway breathing? We're simply saying that the most important function for a human body, any animal, honestly, is the airway part of breathing. So like as a specific example, what am I talking about is if you fell on the ground and passed out and we called EMS to come in here, they would come in and they would follow the A, B, C's. And the A of A, B, C is airway. They go airway, breathing, circulation in that order every single time. They're not going to go to C if A isn't working. So if you had a piece of steak, stuck in your throat and you're laying on the ground, and you don't have an airway, your breathing doesn't matter, your circulation doesn't matter, nothing else matters unless that airway is taken care of. And so we're going to start with airway. So at Advent, and with this concept, is we just follow that same approach. And we do that, though, for people who aren't walking around with big hunks of steak in their throat. They're walking around with throats that are too small for their body, noses that are too small for the body, sinus passages that are too small for the body, lining that's irritated. So it's basically this airway. I mean, what's the most important thing between airway and breathing? It's airway. The good news is it just follows, follow the alphabet. And what's the start of the alphabet? Letter A. So the letter A, airway breathing, airway. What does that mean? Airway, really, when it comes down to a human being, it simply means our two nostrils in the back of the throat. So the breathing triangle it's an upside down triangle. So airway breathing is the category. And just to be clear, in that category, Advent is one practice that's providing a particular type of service in that category. So what does Advent do? We provide office-based solutions for folks who suffer from airway breathing conditions. That's what we do. There are other people who provide services for folks who have airway breathing conditions, but outside of Advent, pretty much almost everybody who's providing those services can only provide one specific type of service. So you might see an allergist to do allergy shots. They're in the airway breathing category. So we are working, basically, if you're an allergist out in the world, I'm a friend of yours and I respect you, and I want to make sure that you are as capable as possible of delivering airway breathing solutions for folks who are out there. If you're a dentist who's, and you may not know kind of this concept, but for folks who have sleep apnea, an alternative to CPAP is an oral appliance. So we offer those at Advent. Most people who have access to that service offering are getting that through dentists, and those dentists are trained specifically to be able to deliver that. So my dental sleep medicine colleagues are also airway breathing warriors. So we're fighting together. I'd like nothing more than to be able to kind of push them forward and help their cause, because their cause is my cause. There are basically, when we really do the numbers, almost half of the adults in this country suffer from airway breathing conditions. Nose isn't working, sinuses aren't working, throat's too small. So like snoring, sleep apnea, nasal obstruction, sinus infections, headaches, allergies, those are all airway breathing conditions. Nobody prior to us has put it all under one house and said, this is all related. So you don't have just an isolated lining problem or an isolated anatomy problem or an isolated nose problem. You have a breathing triangle problem. You have an airway breathing problem, and the problem is in that upper airway. And again, at Advent, we can provide solutions in any of those areas by whatever means necessary. But again, there are other practices, other individuals who are providing a particular type of service within that overarching category. And in my opinion, we are all working together. We're all collaborating, and that's a good thing. And, I guess, so for me, yes, I am founder of Advent. I'm CEO of Advent. It's my pride and joy. On the flip side, I'm here as an advocate for folks who are suffering from airway breathing conditions. And Advent alone is never going to be able to take care of all the people out there who are suffering. So I, as proud as I am of Advent, I am here as an advocate advocate for all of the people out there who are suffering from these conditions, airway breathing conditions, and I'm here as an advocate for all of those providers who are attempting to provide services for folks who have these conditions. And there are a lot of those people, and there are a lot of those people trying to provide services. The news is like, what if you were part of an army you didn't even know you were part of? And I think that's the problem. Is nobody's ever really. Everybody's got these little small tents, and they're trying to treat people in these little, sort of parts of the world. And when the truth is there's one big tent, it's the airway breathing category that we're all sitting under and living under. And when we all, kind of come together with that mindset and construct, we now are part of the same army. We now are fighting together on behalf of those patients that are suffering, and that's a good thing. It's all, for me, part of my mission is to get the word out about these conditions. Part of my mission is to make sure that there are good resources, that people have access to services when they suffer from these conditions, and whether they're going to come to see us at Advent, I hope they do, but if they don't, and if there's somebody out in the world who's been the light bulb's gone off because they heard me talk about this airway breathing concept, the breathing triangle concept, whatever the case may be, and now they have this knowledge to say, hey, maybe there's something I can do about this. And let's say they live in Bozeman, Montana, and we're not in Bozeman, Montana, and they go in to their ENT and they say, I can't breathe through my nose. I heard this dude talking, and I heard that's not normal. Is there something you could do for me? And that ENT looks in there and says, yeah, you got, whatever the problem is, and we might be able to help you. Beautiful. That's a win. So I consider that's a win for me. I mean, it's kind of may sound a little bit odd. And the deal, though, just with clarity, is that ENT in Bozeman, Montana is almost assuredly not going to have access to office-based treatments like we do at Advent. So the likely solution in that scenario would be taking that person to surgery to get things corrected. That's okay. I mean, meaning that I'd wish that surgeon would, sort of come into the new age and adopt some of the new solutions that we have. But if it's simply providing services in the way providing services to folks who have airway breathing conditions in the manner that you know how to do it, kudos. I'm all for it. Congratulations. Good for that person who suffered from these issues, who's now no longer suffering. Good for you as a fellow, airway breathing warrior. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think that, these conditions that people suffer from, do they develop them or through the course of time outside of trauma? Mm-hmm. Or, because you're saying, too small for their body. Let's just talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes people develop them. I'm gonna geek out a little bit. Is that as a species, so human beings as a species, our airways have been shrinking over time. So I think a lot of people. Sleep apnea, let me go this way. Sleep apnea is when your throat is too small for your body. That condition was only, the term first came out, we'll call it about 50 years ago. The main treatment for it came out about 30 to 40 years ago, which is a CPAP machine. So prior to that, people, had these issues, but it didn't have a name for it. So what's the deal there with sleep apnea? A lot of folks who hear our messages go out, a lot of folks I know think, this is like a gimmick. Like, what's up with that? Like, how does everybody all of a sudden have this problem? And it never used to exist. And the deal is, and I'll make it very, very simple, is basically as a species, if you want to think about 4 teeth that you used to have, or as we used to have, was our wisdom teeth, those 4 teeth that sit in the back of our jaws, we used to have space for those. And what is that? And I know that it's kind of getting nebulous. Is that your jaws? That's really your jaws help to create your airway. And so if your jaws are too small for your body, you don't have room for those wisdom teeth. I'm sure they exist, but they're like unicorns. People who are walking around with fully erupted, functional wisdom teeth. Like, I mean, if you're out there, I'd love to, like, I haven't seen that too much. Now, your great-grandparents and my great-grandparents going on back, they had their wisdom teeth. There weren't oral surgeons pulling out wisdom teeth back in the sort of pre-industrial age. So what's up with that is that what has gone on in human beings like us is we've sort of evolved in reverse, where our airways are too small for our body. Mouth breathing is prevalent. If you look around, I mean, just if you don't believe me, just whenever you're in a public space, just look around and see how many people have their mouths drop open and are breathing that way. that is not how we're meant to breathe. But long story short, yes, these breathing triangle issues, these airway breathing issues are more common than not. So I guess my proxy for that is if you have your wisdom teeth, you probably don't have an airway issue. If you don't have your wisdom teeth, you really might, and you might not think you do because everybody else is in the same boat that you're in. But it isn't the way we were built. It's the way we're built now. It's not the way we were supposed to be. So we were supposed to have jaws that are bigger than they are, and because that's not happened, or because we've not developed that way, and we no longer are developing that way, it's whether you want to call it a pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, more people are suffering from these issues than aren't. And that's just the truth. So yeah, it's very, very prevalent. And I think, to me, one of the first keys is people understanding this isn't, like, mouth breathing is not normal. Snoring is not normal. Sinus infections are not normal to have them, frequently. Not being able to pull air through your nose, that's not normal. Like, none of these things are normal, yet they get normalized because everybody's got the same sort of, condition nowadays. Now, some people aren't. Some people are suffering more than others. And, and as an example, so if somebody has an airway breathing condition in the throat, on the milder side of that spectrum, that means they're snoring at night. It's annoying. It's not like it's not a bothersome, but it isn't necessarily a life and death condition. On the flip side, somebody who has sleep apnea, which is where the throat shuts down when they're sleeping at night, sometimes that can happen 100 times or more an hour. Sometimes it's happening 20 to 30 times an hour. That literally is a life, shortening condition. So, meaning that, is the person's problem who's snoring less important than the person's problem who has sleep apnea? Not necessarily. They both have issues. If we had to triage and it's like, okay, only one of you can get treatment, I choose a sleep apnea person. But the good news is we don't have to triage. We have simple treatment options nowadays, so we can really get to we can help all of those folks.
If you're snoring, does that mean you have sleep apnea, or you have a propensity to get sleep apnea?
If you're snoring, almost everybody who has sleep apnea snores. Not everybody who snores has sleep apnea. Everybody who snores is basically, let me go this way. Snoring is the sound of a body crying for help when you're sleeping at night. There's nothing funny about it. I mean, I have a sense of humor and I can laugh too, but I think people who are persistent snorers, they walk around, number one, their throat's probably sore during the day because they've been beating it up at night. Number two, there's a sense of guilt. There's a sense of shame. There's a sense of why is this going on kind of a thing. There's a sense of denial. There's a sense of anger. There's you think about all the emotions that get attached to it. So I don't want to diminish snoring because snoring is a big deal and it shouldn't be that way. And the deal, what's happening when somebody snores?
Why is it going on?
It's the back of the throat is collapsing when you're trying to breathe, when you're sleeping at night. And as it's doing that, it's creating a vibration, which creates that super annoying sound. If somebody has sleep apnea, it goes to the next level where instead of just, sort of collapsing, it shuts and they stop breathing. And that's the difference between the two. But neither one of them are good. Both of them are really harmful. Both of them disrupt sleep. Both of them will disrupt the sleep of those around you. So there's nothing good about either of them. If you snore, there's no clear way for you to know whether you have sleep apnea or you don't have sleep apnea. But if you do snore, there's no guarantee that you have sleep apnea, but you basically just increase your odds. There's a pretty simple checklist, and snoring is on that checklist to say if somebody snores, persistently, what are the odds of you having sleep apnea? Well, they're a whole lot higher than somebody who doesn't snore. Let me start there, and then you just kind of go, kind of keep checking down that list.
I mean, how many people don't snore? I mean, it seems like
that's kind of what I was getting at.
Snores.
It shouldn't be that way. Not everybody snores. So that's the thing. It's become normalized, and it's become normalized, which is a very dangerous thing because I think the problem, or here's the deal: if say you snore, you have sleep apnea. and you ask a question. We kind of been going on a little bit of a tangent, but is this something that's evolved over time in somebody's life, or did they start with it? What's the story? Is all of the time, if somebody snores or has sleep apnea, their throat's too small for their body. That could have been a condition that they've had their entire life. That could have been a condition that they had some degree of. But then what ends up happening for most folks who are snoring or have sleep apnea is that they always have disrupted sleep. And what happens if you have disrupted sleep? You're tired during the day. And what happens if you're tired during the day? You may not make it to the gym today. In fact, instead of going to the gym, you might, maybe you'll grab a cup of coffee and a donut, and you might do what you need to do to stay awake, which is going to likely put a little extra weight on your body, which is going to make your airway a little bit more narrow, which is going to make the problem a little worse when you go to sleep tonight. So instead of the snoring, now all of a sudden you might be, sort of stopping a little bit, which is going to make you a little bit more tired the next day, which, rinse, repeat.
Endless cycle.
And then, with clarity, one of the things that drives me in what I'm trying to do which is get the word out and provide, solutions for folks who have these issues, is that, almost every single time, the only time that our patients that we serve understand how bad the problem was when we put it in the past tense. So you can be snoring, you could be dragging, you could be tired, but if that's life, you may not recognize how bad it is. And then all of a sudden, if you hear a message that says it's not supposed to be like this, and you come in and we figure out what's going on, and we get the nose working if it needs to be working, we get the sinuses open if they need to be open, if we get the lining calm if it needs to be calmed, if we get the throat open if it needs to be open, and all of a sudden we get that airway open, we get the breathing triangle open, and all of a sudden you're breathing during the day like you're supposed to, and you're breathing during the night like you're supposed to, and you're sleeping soundly like you're supposed to for the first time in memory. All of a sudden our patients come in and they say, variations of the theme of, I now can't believe I used to live like that. I can't believe how big of a change that is. And they're not lying. I mean, this is one of those things where I think for me, in the profession that I'm in, and really as the guardian and protector of the most important real estate in the world, which is that breathing triangle, I understand those folks' pain. I understand those folks' sort of joy in getting that off of their back, being able to breathe properly. It's a relatively, miracle is a strong word, but I'd say it doesn't take, you don't have to overthink this, but if you've ever, if I, reach across and I put my hand on your face and I was restricting your breathing, and then I just said, and you said, stop, I can't breathe. And I said, no, I'm just going to stay like this. And I stayed like that for 12, 20 years. You'd get used to it and you'd say, oh, this sucks, but I don't. And then all of a sudden, if I took my hand off, how good does that feel? And that's pretty much what's happening. It's not my hand that's on somebody's throat, but it's their body that is restricting the breathing in these most important areas that literally you can't not think. When this is going on for somebody, you can't not think about it every breath that you take. So just to be clear, human beings breathe about 20,000 times every single day. So 20,000 times a day, if these areas are restricted, you will be affected. Every single day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, 20,000 times, 7, 30, 365, you start, doing the calculations, and it's a big deal. I mean, I think because people don't understand this, they don't really know that it's a problem necessarily, because people don't have access to simple solutions for these issues. It's hard, it is generally hard to get, solutions that exist today for these issues. So they aren't aware, they don't have access, so they just continue to suffer.
This problem exacerbates because remember you talked about how the turbinates start to grow when they're overworking, they grow, and it restricts things even more. So the problem, it's just kind of a snowball.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think let me go this way. The turbinates, people don't know that term necessarily, but the turbinates are the humidifiers in the nose. The turbinates, like everything else in our body, were designed. It's like if you think about your wisdom teeth, your wisdom teeth are they're trying to show up on the playing field when they're supposed to show up. And for most people, they either are partially erupted or they just never come out. So they're trying to do their job. So if you think about the wisdom teeth, harmless four little teeth in the back of your jaws that are waiting for their opportunity to come onto the stage and say, we're here. And almost every single time they don't get to come on the stage because there's not enough room for them. And then, somebody needs to yank them out or they just never erupt. The turbinates are the nose's version of wisdom teeth, meaning the turbinates, there's actually three of them. There's the upper ones, the middle ones, and the lower ones. The lower ones are the ones that we mainly talk about, and the turbinates are the humidifiers of the nose. Our noses are supposed to be wider and bigger than they are, and they're not as wide or as big as they're supposed to be because their downstairs neighbors are too small. So your upper jaw, if you don't have your wisdom teeth, your upper jaws are too small for your body, your lower jaws are too small, or your lower jaw is too small for your body. Your nose is too small for your body. Therefore, the turbinates that, just like the wisdom teeth, were supposed to show up in the world and, have their normal space, don't have it. And so they come in, they develop, and instead of you moving air past them, which is what you're supposed to do, they're there and they're just blocking you up. And then what ends up happening is if you're not able to move air through your nose, those turbinates just sort of fill up a little bit more space and a little bit more space because you're not using it anyway. And so it really just it's like a, sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. But again, from a concept standpoint, we as human beings are supposed to have, again, I'll just go simply, this part of your face, your mid face, is supposed to be bigger. It's not. We are going in the wrong direction from an evolution standpoint, which has helped to create these problems. And then these problems, they can kind of snowball and get bigger over time, and they can pick off their friends. So meaning, very specifically, if your nose isn't working and so your mouth is dropping open, like worst case scenario for somebody who's got a throat that's a little bit too tight for their body is if I'm going to throw some gas on that fire, is I jam their nose up and say, if I really want to throw gas on, I jam their nose up, have them sleep on their back, and give them a couple of drinks before they went to bed at night, and I guarantee the world that'll be the worst night of sleep they'll ever have, because when your mouth drops open, your tongue falls backwards into an airway that's already too narrow. And so these things, again, the breathing triangle, airway, it's interrelated. So you can't have a breathing triangle that's working properly if the throat isn't open and the nose isn't open and the sinuses aren't open and the lining isn't calm. It's not working properly. And again, most people, when they think about, some people, when they think about these nose and throat conditions, I think even though they themselves may be the one who's suffering and have these issues, they may think these are issues that, I know, I got a friend who's got sinus problems, but I don't think I got a problem. And that same person very likely is, dropping their mouth open when they're sleeping at night and there's drool on their pillow every single night. Like, that's not normal. That's not the way it's supposed to be, but they don't know it's become normalized. And so we just sort of, as a society, sort of say, yeah, everybody snores. Everybody snores a little bit. Everybody's drops their mouth open to breathe. It's not that big of a deal. And I'd say, yeah, it is. It's not that big of a deal if there's nothing you can do about it. Like, if there's nothing you can do about it, just deal with it, suck it up. If there's something you can do about it, it is a big deal because the area that we're talking about is the most important area that there is. There's no area. I mean, again, most people, I'm an ENT and I'm an otolaryngologist. Most people don't think about that as sort of the guardian and protector of the most important area of the human body. If you think about a doctor or a surgeon, you probably think about a neurosurgeon or cardiac thoracic surgeon. And I'd say, who's got, whatever, who wins the medal for, guardian protector of the most important part of the body? I do. Now, I'm not saying I'm more important than I'm generally speaking, but I'm saying your brain doesn't matter. If your airway isn't working, your brain actually is unimportant. If your airway isn't working, your breathing is unimportant. If your airway isn't working, your heart is unimportant. If your airway is working, then okay, now we can move to the B and the C, the breathing and the circulation. But it is in that order. It's in that order every single time. And many people who have some of these downstream conditions have them because their airway isn't formed properly, isn't open properly. So, and this is going a little bit of a different direction, but if you go to a cardiologist's office, So go to cardiologist's office. And you go to the waiting room and you say, hey, people in the waiting room, what are you here for? Well, I had a heart attack. I had arrhythmia. I had this, I had that, and the other thing. Okay. Understood. And many studies have been done looking at this. If you look at the people who go and sit in cardiologist's office, patients there, they're going in for their cardiovascular issue, but almost all of those individuals have airway conditions that either are directly responsible for those conditions or very likely to be. And when I say that, I mean very specifically sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea is a very specific entity. If you have obstructive sleep apnea, your risks of heart attacks and strokes and all these sort of diabetes and all these sort of vascular issues go way up. Now, if you drop down here with a heart attack and you've been snoring every single night when you've been sleeping for the last 20 years, and we call it EMS, and EMS came in here, they'd follow the ABCs, but if your airway's fine, your breathing's fine, oh my God, you might have a heart attack, they'll take you to the hospital, and the first thing they're not going to do is focus on your snoring. They'll focus on your heart, which is what they're supposed to do, but what my point being is nobody's going to connect this heart attack that you had to the airway condition that you've had your entire life, but they should. And that should have been addressed. That should have been identified. That should have been addressed. That should have been treated before you had to suffer from having that heart attack. Now, not everybody who's got a plugged up nose or plugged up sinus is going to have a heart attack. I'm not saying that. Not everybody who's got sleep apnea or snores is going to have a heart attack. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is even one person who has a heart attack or a stroke secondary to an airway condition that could have been treated with simple maneuvers, that's one too many. And I'm telling you right now, it's not just one person. There's tens of thousands of people out there who are getting treated for conditions that are downstream to the airway, that if the airway problem was identified properly, if the airway problem was treated properly, they wouldn't be treated for that heart attack. They wouldn't be being treated for the stroke. They would be simply living the life that they're supposed to have in the manner that they were supposed to have it. But that's why the airway is so important. That's why airway breathing is so important. That's why it is so important that we get the word out about these conditions and about how important they are and how important they are to be treated. In my opinion, aggressively, meaning we need to make sure people understand what's going on. We need to make sure people have access to the simple solutions that exist. We need to be able to deliver those solutions. We need to make sure that those solutions are working. And then we need to be able to look at all of those people who now their potential is truly unlocked. We need to be able to look at them as success stories and say, hey, we just prevented something, bad from happening.
I think downstream conditions is a big thing that we should be talking about, because the primary benefit is, I breathe well. This is great. Now I'm sleeping better. But the lack thereof, you're snoring every night. You're taking in maybe 60% of the air that you're supposed to be taking in, and that then leads to these downstream conditions. So the secondary benefits primary benefits. Hey, right now I breathe better than I ever have, and it affects me in all facets of my life. I'm more energy. I sleep better. I'm doing things that I wasn't able to do before. I'm more active.
Sure.
But they're also diminishing the onset of these downstream benefits, and that's something we should probably talk more about.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the reason I think we don't talk more about it is it probably, I don't know how it might get a little confusing for people. Like he couldn't breathe through his nose. Why are they talking about heart attacks?
Blood pressure.
Yeah, all of these things. I guess, and so I get I don't know how you say this. I can understand why there might be a reluctance to sort of really ponder those connections, but those connections exist, and you don't have to be an ENT, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, you don't have to be a neurosurgeon even. You don't have to be any of these things to understand or comprehend how negatively impactful it is to have an airway that's not working properly. Like and the good thing I'd say for this airway breathing cause, is every single person who's walking around the face of the earth can understand what it might be like physically, mentally, and emotionally if that airway is restricted. So if I, like as an example, if I came in and I was talking about before, I don't do these things. So just I'm not going to do it. But hypothetically, if I'm sitting here and I plug your nose up, if all I did that, I just pinch your nose and I just said, and we're just going to sit here, you wouldn't like it after a while. Nobody would. If all of a sudden I plugged both of those things, and I'd say for, COVID's not that far in the rearview mirror, but, I think that back in COVID, what was the, one of the biggest complaints was the masks. I hate wearing a mask. It's bothersome. It is. What was the mask covering? It was covering your breathing triangle. Very specifically, it was covering your breathing triangle. And why didn't people like that? Because people don't like when their airways are restricted. So you restrict somebody's airway, and all of a sudden it's problematic. And again, you don't have, everybody can empathize with that. Now, not everybody's walking around with noses that are plugged up on a persistent basis, but millions of people are. Not everybody's walking around with sinus passageways that are not open properly, but millions of people are. Not everybody's walking around with a throat that's too tight for their body, but millions of people are. So, you know what I mean? Like everybody can empathize and sympathize with airway conditions, because we as an animal, as a species, are designed to protect our airway at all costs. You will do anything and everything possible to protect your airway. If I truly shut your breathing triangle, you'll fight, and you should. That literally you'll fight as hard as a human and can possibly fight, because the alternative to that is you don't exist. So, what's more special, precious than life itself? Nothing. And so in order to protect and preserve that, it starts with the airway. It can end with your airway if the airway is not working properly. And so I think that's one good thing, is everybody, I think, understands that connection. I think it gets a little harder, a little trickier for people to understand, hey, okay, I just said everything I said about the airway, but now I want to talk about the airway breathing. I want to talk about circulation. I want to talk about these downstream things. Now we start kind of losing some people to say, hey, I never had a heart attack. I don't know what they're talking about here. That's my only, but I guess where I'm going though is you don't have to overthink it to understand how negatively impactful it is to have an airway that's not working properly. I mean, if your body is struggling to breathe on a consistent basis, day and night, it's going to take its toll, especially the night. I mean, the day sucks, but I'd say the night, if you are stopping breathing when you're sleeping at night, that you're not only struggling in a time that you shouldn't, that's also the time. I mean, when you're sleeping, that's your mind, your body, your soul's opportunity to rest and recover. And so just imagine this world where if you got whatever, so let's call it 8 hours sleep, 8 hours of sleep, that's what you're supposed to have. And that's when your body's supposed to recharge, like, hey, just going to relax from the day. We're going to get ready for the next day. And instead of that, so instead of letting you sleep and relax and rest, I'm now going to, you're going to go to war at night. And, you're going to go in the ring with Mike Tyson, or you're going to go in the MMA, and instead of sleep, I'm not going to let you sleep. You're in the cage, and you're in a cage match for your life every single night. And then imagine how you're going to feel the next day. It's not just, so I guess it's sort of, there's this restorative aspect of sleep and breathing that's related to that. And I think people sort of connect the dots between, well, here's, flat ground. And if somebody's having trouble, we're just going, it's like, oh, it's a negative, but it's really a double whammy, because it's not only that you're struggling to breathe at the very time your body is supposed to be recovering. So it's like those two things add together, and it makes it extra worse.
Why am I walking around like a zombie all the time? Why do I feel this way? Why with the lack of energy? Why is everybody going after energy drinks?
Correct.
This is a kind of a solution to
it
that.
Is. And just to be clear, not everybody this isn't the only reason that people walk around looking for energy drinks, but I'd say a lot of people who are looking for energy drinks have these conditions. And how do I know that? Because most adults have some degree of airway narrowing based off everything we were talking about before. So, it's highly likely that this is something that is something that you're dealing with to some extent, some folks more than others. But it's definitely, these are common issues. These are debilitating issues. These are issues that, because they're so common, I don't think people recognize how debilitating they are. And because they happen, some of this is happening when people are sleeping at night. I don't think people recognize, because they're sleeping. They're trying to sleep. They're sort of unaware. So kind of go this way. If what happened to somebody who has sleep apnea happened to them when they were fully awake during the day, they'd be like, what the hell is it? Like, no, again, I'm not going to do this. I keep threatening you, but I'm not. If I was going to reach across here and I'm literally, hey, I'm just going to hold my hands on your throat. I'm going to choke it. I want to hear you. I'm going to do this until I hear you snore. And I'm just going to hold there. And I'm going to stay here for 8 hours. It's just 8 hours. What's 8 hours? Okay. Well, and tomorrow we're going to do the same thing. And then, maybe 20 times every hour, I'm going to go all the way tight so you can't breathe. And then I'm going to let up so you're snoring. And then maybe the next day I'm going to go 100 times an hour. And you're cool with that, right? And no, and the answer is there's not a sane human being.
That's what's happening.
That's what's happening, but you're asleep.
It's 145 times. I think it was John that we talked about. 145 times an hour.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't, but
down.
even the thing is, and those numbers are true. Some people do that frequently, but I'd say, well, for you today, I'm just going to do it once an hour. You're cool with that, right? And you'd say, no, I don't want that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, what about, what at 5 times, 10 times? So just to be clear, that's when we do studies to check to see if people have sleep apnea, we're doing a test to see how many times their body is stopping breathing at night. And, 0 is normal. You shouldn't be doing it at all. 0 per hour. The cutoff is roughly around 5. If you're 5 or less, we sort of say, it's like snoring. I don't know if it's sleep apnea. Then you go up the ladder 10, 20, 30, and you get to more severe zones. But kind of where I was talking about, would you want, like I just said, while you're awake, I'm not going to do this when you're asleep, but I'm just going to do it when you're awake. While you're awake, every 20 minutes, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to, stop you. I'm going to strangle your breathing. Actually, it's more than that. So it'd be like, okay, so every 20 minutes, you're cool with that, right? No, you'd be like, no way, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just saying that we have normalized something that is not normal. Like, it is not normal for your body to be struggling to breathe. It's just not normal. Part of the issue is that you're asleep when it's happening, and part of the issue is that it's so common that people have just kind of gotten used to it.